In recent videos, I've been advising game designers to empathise with their potential user base, to try to understand their players so they can create something which has value, relevance and purpose, something that addresses basic human needs. In this video, I'm going to try and pin down what those needs might be. I'm Adam Porter, I'm a board game designer based out of Cardiff in Wales. And Stephen Rice was an American psychologist who published a study in the year 2000, whereby he surveyed 6,000 individuals across 4 continents and identified 16 basic human desires. He concluded that these 16 desires motivate all of our behaviours and actions. So how can board games tap into these basic human desires? And how can we offer experiences that appeal to our players? It would be a stretch to suggest that board games can fulfill our desire to eat. Neither can I genuinely claim that board games are particularly conducive to sex and romance, though Bruno Feduti's Kama Sutra game has a good stab at it. And I'm sure Hasbro's Twister is occasionally played with less family-friendly house rules. The other 14 desires, though, I think I can make a stronger case for those. So in this video, we're going to focus on 7 desires relating to human interaction, and next week, we'll take a look at all the rest. Gamers often talk about certain games as being multiplayer solitaire, and that term tends to be used disparagingly about games which feature very little direct interaction between players throughout the game. Perhaps you simply compare your scores at the end of the game and that determines the winner. I hope that this list goes some way towards demonstrating that interaction in board games is about more than just the gameplay itself. It's about the community as a whole, and a clever designer or publisher is going to tap into that. There's a reason that so-called multiplayer solitaire games remain popular. It's because the best examples, despite sidelining in-game interaction, allow players to interact outside of the game, fulfilling other basic desires. Of course, not all of these wants apply to every individual player, but if your game addresses a number of these basic desires, it's going to have a good chance of finding an audience. So players want approval. Acceptance has always been part of the hobby gaming scene. In the 70s and 80s, the non-sporty kids, the academic kids, the outsiders took ownership of tabletop gaming. They created Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer. They formed communities out of model shops and comic book stores. They communicated with each other by mail through fanzines. They found acceptance among like-minded youths. The hobby is broader now and it's more visible, but it still has community at its heart. Gamers gather in groups in an evening or at the weekend in cafes, church halls, game stores. With thousands of games being produced each year, there's a game to suit everybody. We have some way to go, but hopefully barriers are being broken down and we're becoming more inclusive year after year. Gaming is an escape for many people, from their work stresses, their home stresses, and their own anxieties and insecurities. For people seeking acceptance, the gaming hobby can be a sanctuary. So how can game designers and publishers acknowledge this human desire? Well, by respecting and nurturing gaming communities. This might be pre-publication engagement with backers during a crowdfunding campaign, or it might be post-publication engagement at conventions or on social media. Perhaps you could run events or competitions and giveaways, but a spirit of acceptance and accessibility and inclusion should permeate all aspects of your design. We'll come back to this in a future video. Players want parameters. One of the great things about board games is that they provide a set of rules, parameters within which social interactions can occur. For many people, myself included, this is a big relief. Society can be tiring. There's so much guessing and second guessing about other people's motivations and emotions and actions. Did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? What is the right thing anyway? There's so many grey areas. For many people, a strong code or a clearly defined set of rules frees them to interact without stress or anxiety. In my experience, this is particularly important for some members of the community who are neurodivergent, especially those who struggle socially. Board games excel here. The rules are defined, cheating is universally considered wrong, interactions are structured, and the person who played the most effectively within these constraints is justly rewarded. Players want to spend time with their families. Board games have been an enduring source of entertainment for children for many centuries. A large portion of board game sales are made to parents seeking to interact with their children away from TV screens or video game consoles. Adults look back to their own childhoods with fondness and nostalgia, and they want their children to experience the things that they enjoyed when they were young. This is a major driver of the consistently high sales of Monopoly. It gets passed down from generation to generation, often without anybody ever actually picking up the rulebook, but instead playing by their own house rules which have evolved over decades. I'm sure the same is happening now with Dungeons and Dragons and Risk and Warhammer, perhaps even Catan and more recent games. Players want power. There's a certain class of board game which puts this type of interaction up front and centre. Negotiation games feature players making deals, trading items, influencing each other's decisions. Bluffing games such as Cockroach Poker and Sheriff of Nottingham force players to lie and throw their opponents off the scent. The most interactive games in the hobby are social deduction games such as Avalon or Deception, which pit two or more teams against each other with the players clueless regarding who belongs to each team. The players make deductions, they lie about their motives and manipulate each other, throwing accusations at other players to take the heat off themselves and to demonstrate that they are not the bad guy. These games are wildly popular. They demonstrate that even if a game has a small number of components, a high level of interaction in the game can truly engage the players and keep them coming back for more. Many of the behaviours involved in these games wouldn't be acceptable in regular society, so a huge part of the appeal is the chance to practice these behaviours in a safe space where nobody is hurt or offended. Players want companionship. I've touched on a lot of ways in which board gaming can promote social contact already, but in many ways this is the prime purpose of tabletop gaming. Board gaming is a shared hobby, and engaged players tend to seek out other players. They love to talk about games just as much as playing them, whether in person or on social media. And this can be extremely beneficial to game makers, since engaged players can become brand advocates, sharing their positive experiences with your project and promoting it widely without any financial investment on the publisher's part. Players want status. For each board game purchase, there is a game owner, a rules teacher. These are inherently high status positions. The other players look to you to share knowledge and to invite them into a fun experience. For a short period of time as game owner, you're the leader of the club. Games are also inherently competitive. There's always a winner. There's usually several losers. They provide the empowering experience of success and domination when you win, as well as the humbling experience of losing, all in a safe space. This is one of the reasons that games are so valuable as an educational tool for children. Collectors often pride themselves on their acquisitions. The multitude of shelfies posted on Instagram and Board Game Geek demonstrates how strong this "look what I've got" impulse is. Board game publishers often try to profit from this by creating collector's editions or anniversary editions of popular games. These are usually high-priced editions of the game with improved components, exclusive items and a limited print run, designed to appeal to the collector. These editions have become particularly prominent since the rise of crowdfunding platforms and their frequent reliance on exclusive items to drive interest in a campaign. The idea here is that the player gets to have bragging rights. Look how fancy my edition of the game is. Players want to screw each other over. Board games can satisfy the more vindictive desires that people have in a safe space. It's common to see a player taking great pleasure at furthering their own position by ruining somebody else's day. Personally, I'm not a fan of negative interaction in games. It makes it hard for me to relate to this desire in other players. But I frequently do see gamers at meetups regaling anecdotes of the creative ways in which they screwed over their friends or family members in a board game. These take-that opportunities in games are seen as a key selling point to many players. The overarching goal of Monopoly is to eliminate all of your opponents one by one and be the last person standing. And I think it's quite telling that many players try and soften the experience by handing out wads of free banknotes whenever you land on free parking, with the best intention of keeping everybody involved, even though it creates a game that never actually ends. What's your favourite sort of interaction in board games? And have you witnessed board games bringing people together? Please join me again next week and we're going to look at 7 more human desires and how tabletop games can fulfil them.